Welcome to the second video in From the Ground Up video series on marketing fundamentals. I'm Kim Goldsmith. We're going to look at who it is you're selling to. We all know it's impossible to reach everyone. So how do you narrow it down to find the people who are the best fit for your product or business? Even that group can seem a bit out of reach. So how do you narrow it down even further to create market segments, each with their own characteristics or personas? Finally, what do you say to them when you work out who they are? And what do they want to hear from you? And how do you ensure you're using the right language? We'll have a look at what questions you need to be asking. After working out what it is you do and why, the next big question is to work out who it is you need to be marketing to. For some of you, it'll be an existing customer base with some fine-tuning around the edges to either add value to your offering or to optimise sales by finding out more about that type of customer, assuming it's already a viable market segment. For others, it might be starting from scratch and building a profile from the bottom up. The benefit of having an existing group of customers, even if they aren't the right type, is that you'll have an opportunity to find out a lot more about what makes them tick, or you'll know what type of customer you don't want. You also need to know what your market's expectations are of your offering. That determines how you position your product or service. Think about the spectrum we touched on in video 1. Are you cheap and cheerful, or are you at the premium exclusive end of the spectrum, or somewhere in between? Or can you set an expectation that gets you the price you want for the produce you have available at the time? Limited supply and seasonality can work in your favour here, as can customer values, but you've got to know what those values are. Your marketing mix must tick all the boxes in terms of your offering solving your customers' problems. Put it this way, there's no point selling from the farm gate if your customers don't have a car or access to public transport, or there's no point promoting through the local newspaper if your market doesn't buy newspapers. Your job is to find out as much about your target market as you can, to take the guesswork out of what goes into the marketing mix. No one has budgets that allow you to reach everyone, nor do most of us want to. So what we need to think about is our market being like an orange, and we just want the segments of that orange that are the sweetest for our business. Segmenting markets loosely covers 4 areas. Geographic, that's where your market's located. Demographics, the age, gender, socioeconomic status, life cycle, profession, disposable income, that sort of thing. Then there's psychographics. That's social class that taps into values and aspirations, lifestyles, which again taps into values and motivations, and personality types. Finally, there's behavioural segmentation, which allows us to further break down the target market based on the benefits the potential customer perceives our product having, or their usage of it, which might be the frequency of a purchase or the size of a purchase. In the front of your workbook, you'll find some links in the resources that may help you start building a profile of your market segments. Australian Bureau of Statistics data, local government data, industry data can give you a lot of information to get started with. Most market segments are a mix of all segment types. The more detail you have, that paints a picture of a group of customers that is big enough in size and homogeneous enough in characteristics to be a viable segment. If you've got more than one market segment, and many businesses do, then you need to ensure your segments are heterogeneous enough, that is different enough to treat them differently, delivering a marketing mix that meets the needs of each, which really might just mean tweaking your main marketing mix. Either way, you should be able to measure the size of your market segments. The next stage of building your market profile is developing the customer or buyer persona. That puts a face and a name to your segments. It helps make us think about our marketing efforts as something less abstract and conceptual to a communication with another person. In this slide, you'll see a basic persona for a customer I've called Alan Banker. I've tried to drill down into who he is, what his demographic, lifestyle, life stage, interests, information gathering, and motivations might be. So think about, where would you try to promote your product to Alan if he were typical of your target market? What clues does this information give you about where you might be selling or promoting, and what messages you might be positioning to reach him? This slide is a good starting point in terms of the types of questions you need to start asking. What other questions might you add to the list? Take a moment to jot these down before we hear how pastured egg producer and regenerative farmer Angus Morris of Farmer Brown's Pastured Eggs has managed his marketing. Angus talks about how connecting with customers has been one of the hardest things their family business has had to grapple with, even though they bought the business with an existing customer base. He explains why.
We did buy the business as a going concern, so we did have some customers in place when we started, and then we went through this rollercoaster ride of learning production, having sort of ups and downs in production and managing customers with those ups and downs. So sometimes we'd have too many customers and not enough eggs, and then we'd flip that around, we'd have too many eggs and not enough customers. And so we'd run out and do a quick sort of knock on doors, which got us through. So really the knock on door approach was, hi, we're Angus from Farmer Brown's. This is a little bit about what we do. We're wondering if you'd be interested in a free sample of our eggs.
Yeah.
And so we just pretty much went down that path, because we found if we offered them a free sample and we gave them a generous sample, it was a little bit harder for them to say no. So
did that set you up with customers who then became loyal, repeat customers?
Well, once we got our foot in the door and we had a trial and it was, okay, we haven't lost many of those customers. There's a little bit of chopping and changing, but it's pretty small, the dropout rate. So, I would say reasonably loyal customers, and I think that's what we started to learn was, why are these guys reasonably loyal? And we need to understand that. And then we also need to try and think about what can we do to, to strengthen our relationship or even connection with the end user of the product, because they're actually not necessarily our customers.
Was the storytelling that you did part of that approach?
The storytelling, well, when we were learning the business for the first 2 or 3 years, we were just, we weren't great at telling the story, that's for sure. We were rattling off benefits and, hen welfare, free to roam, like a lot of the stuff that any of the pastured egg producers talk about. But it wasn't until we got a bit of confidence in our production and then started to say, okay, let's get serious about trying to grow this, which was probably 18 months ago now. And then that's when the storytelling started to come to the surface, or come to the, one of the high priorities. And that happened to coincide with, the regional platters training and meeting you and talking about social media and what we could do there to improve our presence, a bit of strategy behind it, a bit of brand strategy, communication strategy. So all that happened at the right time for us.
And has it paid dividends?
Definitely, without doubt. The momentum, the sales momentum that has been driven by consistent social media. So our social media went from one post occasionally and, just random stuff not thought out to, after our training with you, 3 a week, more or less, and with a little bit of thought behind it. All of a sudden, we started to get people contacting us. We also did a little bit of other PR. We got onto into the Open Road magazine from NRMA and a few other little things, and all of a sudden we started to have people ringing us, which was just something we hadn't had in the 3 years prior. And so our sales growth, we've gone from around 180,000 a year the year before to 320,000 this year, and heading towards 500 in the following 12 months. those sales aren't fully in place, but it's, we can see it.
It's tracking in the right direction.
Yes.
Having a plan, it seems to be one of those things that you either do or don't have when I speak to producers. Was having a plan in place important?
I think, yes, and I think the process of doing the plan is as valuable, because it's that thinking behind it that sort of galvanises your thought processes, what you're going to be saying, how you're going to be communicating and what you're going to be communicating, and then that flows through into everything that you think about from that point on. So the plan and the process together, I think, particularly if you haven't done much prior, are a pretty powerful combination.
At this stage, what are you thinking? Have you got enough information to get to work on building a profile of your market segment? And have you got enough information to build some customer personas? What else do you need to find out to get this happening? Part 2 of your workbook gives you questions and space to start working through this. This slide covers a few more questions to get you thinking too. Coming up next is an animated recap of some of the very basic questions you might want to ask your customers and why that's important. While you're watching this, think about how you might organise the data you collect. Would you put it in a simple Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, or customer relationship management software, the offerings for which are many and vary in complexity, but it has to be something easy for you to use and access. It's time to get cracking on what is essentially more market research. We're going to pull it all together in the third video, but you'll need as much information as you can gather at this stage to be ready to move on to creating that one-page, quick-glance marketing communications plan. Make note of the information you don't have, and when you get a chance to spend some time on it, chase it up. It is a juggle being a jack of all trades within your small business. However, even if you outsource this job to someone else, you still need to be across it and have information that a professional marketer will need to be able to do the job for you. They won't know what goals to set or what performance indicators to report on if you don't know what it is you're trying to achieve in your business, why you're doing it, and who you want as your customer base. Remember, the reason we're working on these plans is to make better, informed decisions and to put everyone on the same page.